people holding signs and showing their camaraderie and wanting better for Isabella and wanting justice for Isabella. They wore pink because that was Isabella's favorite color.
They called her clumsy. They called it discipline. They called 911 far too late. This isn't just a story about a life stolen. It's about every adult who turned a blind eye. A little girl whose gentle pleas were unheard, whose struggles were overlooked, and whose laughter slowly faded while the world looked away. To truly understand what went wrong and how this tragedy unfolded, we need to know who she really was, beyond the labels and shadows. On July 5th, 2019, in the small, peaceful town of Cold Springs, Nevada, Isabella Loving was born to Nicholas and Andrea Loving. A cheerful little girl with a gentle nature, she found joy in simple things: her favorite color pink, twirling around the house to music, splashing paint during bath time, and spending quiet moments coloring. Life at home was full of movement and noise, with Isabella sharing it alongside two older sisters, an older brother, and eventually a baby brother. Andrea had a son from a previous relationship, and Nicholas entered their lives when the boy was still very young. Over time, their family grew. After 3 daughters, the couple finally welcomed the baby boy Nicholas had long hoped for, a moment of celebration in their busy household. Their home on Crystal Canyon Boulevard reflected a working family trying to build a life together. Nicholas and Andrea ran a home remodeling business, Extreme Remodeling LLC, and appeared to balance entrepreneurship and parenting with the usual ups and downs. To those looking in, things seemed fairly typical, but a closer look at Isabella's experience reveals quiet signs of disconnection. In photos, she often looked less included, dressed in older clothes, her hair noticeably short, her face more reserved. Compared to her siblings' cozy beds, she had a small mattress on the floor, which may have seemed practical but left a clear impression. In a house full of beds, love, and shared laughter, Isabella's corner told a softer, quieter story. It's the kind of irony life seems to enjoy, where the smallest child with the brightest smile can sometimes be the most overlooked.
But before we begin, I just want to say thank you to my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me. Your engagement helps make these stories even more meaningful. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. There was a time when Isabella appeared to be treated with the same love and care as the rest of her siblings. A former nanny who had once helped care for the children shared old photos of Isabella as a baby, smiling, healthy, and surrounded by warmth. The nanny confirmed that during her time with the family, Isabella had not been singled out in any noticeable way. She blended right in with her siblings, receiving the same affection and attention. But when the family welcomed their youngest child, Isabella's little brother, the dynamic inside the home began to shift. Andrea chose to stay home with the kids, and with that decision, the nanny's help was no longer needed. That change marked the beginning of what some believe was a gradual shift in how Isabella was treated. Previously, Andrea had worked alongside Nicholas in their shared venture, a remodeling company known as Extreme Remodeling LLC. Curiously, the business had gone through several name changes over time, though not because they were rebranding for marketing flair. According to some former clients, the couple may have had a few too many creative approaches to customer service. Allegations surfaced claiming that deposits were collected, but repairs were left unfinished, or in some cases, never even started. In other homes, the work was reportedly so poorly done that it created more problems than it solved. It all paints a picture not just of an unreliable business, but of two people who may have been better at escaping accountability than handling drywall. At approximately 6:50 a.m. on April 3, 2025, a call was made to emergency services by Isabella's father. He reported that his 5-year-old daughter, who hadn't been feeling well the previous night, was now unresponsive and cold. Emergency crews quickly arrived at the family's residence on Crystal Canyon Boulevard. Upstairs, they found Isabella lying near a small mattress placed directly on the floor. Despite their efforts, it became clear there was nothing that could be done. Isabella was pronounced deceased at the scene. While first responders worked professionally, they couldn't help but notice the visible signs of injury, prompting immediate concern about the situation surrounding her passing. In a home filled with noise and movement, one quiet room told a much heavier story. Given the unusual circumstances, law enforcement was called to investigate. When questioned, Isabella's father offered a series of explanations for her condition. He claimed she had recently fallen from his truck, and he had caught her by the arms, an action, he said, that might explain the bruising. He also stated that another child had accidentally struck her in the face with a toy bat, which supposedly caused a black eye. Then, as if unlucky events had a weekly subscription, he shared that Isabella had fallen from the truck a second time just days later, this time hitting her head. While these statements attempted to account for a few of her injuries, the majority were left unexplained. And unfortunately, some stories, no matter how creative, fail to cover what silence reveals. Nicholas described Isabella as unusually prone to accidents, mentioning that she often tripped or fell, including more than once on the stairs. He explained that he and Andrea had even considered taking her to a specialist in June to look into the cause of her frequent falls. Both parents also shared that Isabella had been unwell for over a week leading up to her death. According to them, she had shown concerning symptoms like coughing up blood and mucus and had vomited the evening before she passed. They said she was put to bed sometime between 7 and 8 p.m., and during the night, one of the other children woke them up to report that Isabella was sick. The parents checked on her, found nothing alarming, and returned to sleep. Nicholas claimed he checked in on her once more during the night, only to discover in the morning that she was no longer responsive. It was a timeline that, if nothing else, raised more questions than it answered. When officials asked why medical help hadn't been sought earlier, especially given the severity and length of Isabella's reported illness, the parents responded with reasoning that was, at best, confusing. They admitted they had been hesitant to take her in for treatment because they were worried medical professionals would notice things on her body. They also cited an unclear claim that someone had once advised them not to seek medical help until an illness had persisted for at least 12 days. Naturally, this explanation didn't exactly clear anything up.
Adding to the concern, both parents acknowledged that they were afraid of another visit from Child Protective Services, which had previously opened a case involving the family. That case, however, had recently been closed, a small detail that probably didn't reassure anyone at this point. In a strange twist of logic, it seemed the fear of being investigated had somehow outweighed the urgency of caring for a very sick child. Shortly after giving their initial accounts, Nicholas and Andrea were brought to the Woe County Sheriff's Department for follow-up interviews. During questioning, Isabella's father denied ever using physical discipline or any form of aggression toward his daughter. He told officers that he spent most of his time working and wasn't home enough to know how her injuries occurred. When asked about visible scrapes on his hands and fingers, he attributed them to his construction work. He also brought up a few incidents that, in his view, might explain what had happened to Isabella. One such event involved her falling from his Ford pickup truck about a week earlier. Interestingly, his version of that fall changed during the interview. From her hitting the pavement face first in one telling to using her hands to break the fall in another. Perhaps memory becomes a little flexible when trying to account for the unexplainable. Nicholas recounted that on the night of April 2nd, Isabella wasn't feeling well and mentioned she felt cold. He checked her temperature and found it to be around 96 or 97 degrees. Rather than seeking medical help, he opted for a bath and then sent her to bed. He said he turned in for the night around 9 or 10 p.m. and was later awakened by someone panicking that Isabella wasn't breathing, supposedly around 7 a.m. However, that part of the timeline began to shift, too. Eventually, Nicholas admitted that he and Andrea had actually found Isabella unresponsive closer to 2 a.m., but waited nearly 5 hours before contacting emergency services. When asked why, he explained that he had been comforting his distraught wife. During the same interview, he revealed something else, that Isabella had been kept in a small 5x5 space in the bedroom, a makeshift cubby, he called it. He acknowledged placing her in there once, but said it was usually Andrea who used it. a parenting strategy not likely to be endorsed in any self-help book. During her interview with detectives, Andrea acknowledged that Isabella had been placed in the small 5x5 cubby as a form of discipline, sometimes for simple things like sneaking candy. She then revealed that just 4 days before emergency services were contacted, she witnessed an incident involving Nicholas. According to Andrea, Nicholas acted aggressively toward Isabella and pulled her upstairs by the hood of her clothing. Shortly after, she recalled hearing raised voices and a loud thump against the wall. The following day, she noticed a visible mark on her daughter's face. By the end of the questioning, Andrea appeared filled with remorse. She told officers that she believed she should be held accountable for not stepping in, and that Nicholas should answer for what happened to their daughter.
Investigators also spoke with Isabella's older sisters, who recalled being woken up around midnight. They were brought downstairs and told by their father that Isabella had passed away and that they might be going on a trip soon. This conversation, odd as it was, helped solidify the timeline. With their findings mounting, authorities felt they had enough to move forward. Nicholas Loving, age 35, was formally charged with causing substantial bodily harm and placed in custody on a $10 million cash-only bond. Despite Andrea's own admission of guilt, openly stating she should be held accountable for doing nothing, she had not been arrested at that time. Apparently, remorse doesn't always come with handcuffs. After Nicholas's arrest, the explanation for the delayed emergency call began to evolve. Initially, he claimed he had been comforting Andrea. Later, he suggested it was Andrea who prevented the call, allegedly because she wanted to flee. Meanwhile, Andrea gave her own version, saying Nicholas wouldn't let her call for help because he was considering something far more drastic, burying Isabella in the backyard and leaving for Virginia. She claims she talked him out of it, citing practical concerns, including what would happen to the body. Regardless of whose version came closer to the truth, the outcome was the same. At some point that night, Isabella's body was moved from the small cubby where she typically slept, placed with her mattress in another part of the room, and a story was crafted around a discovery at 7 a.m. In the end, the only thing both parents seemed to agree on was how to rewrite the ending. At this time, the official cause of Isabella's death remains undetermined, as the medical examiner has not yet finalized the autopsy report. There is hope that, once the findings are released, they may lead to further legal action, including possible charges against her mother. Many who have followed the case closely point to photos of Isabella that seem to reflect a troubling pattern. One image in particular, reportedly taken during a family trip to Disneyland just weeks before her passing, has raised questions. In it, Isabella appears visibly unwell, a fact that has stirred confusion about why anyone would think it was appropriate to take her out in public in such a state. Some online speculation has suggested that Isabella may have been treated differently due to rumors about her parentage, possibly being the result of an affair. Still, while that theory circulates, it remains unverified. Ironically, many observers have commented that Isabella bore a strong resemblance to her father. Just 2 weeks after Isabella's death on April 17th, Andrea left the family home, reportedly taking a number of belongings with her. By that time, the other children had already been placed in protective custody. Despite the circumstances, Andrea had no apparent issue returning to the same home where Isabella had died, even staying there for several more weeks. Since then, she has been living with her own mother, Diana 𝐂𝐨𝐬𝐿, who has publicly supported her daughter. Diana has claimed that Andrea was the victim of domestic violence and shouldn't be held responsible for what happened. She also stated that Isabella appeared healthy and unharmed during a visit in January, just a few months before the incident. While some may see this as a defense, others view it more as denial wrapped in family loyalty and sprinkled with a strong dose of selective memory. In the wake of Isabella's passing, public outcry has continued to grow. Ashley Viney, the aunt of Andrea's oldest son, has organized protests demanding accountability, not only from the parents but from the child welfare system itself. Ashley and others had raised concerns about Isabella's well-being well before her death, but despite these efforts, the child services case tied to the family was closed just 1 month prior. Protesters now want those responsible for reviewing the case, especially the social workers involved, to answer for what was missed. Many feel that surface-level checks were mistaken for actual safety. As Ashley put it, the home might have looked fine on the outside, clean rooms, food in the kitchen, But no one seemed to question what was happening beyond that. And somehow, even with visible warning signs, the response was still, "Everything looks fine here." Sometimes it seems appearances really do pass inspection, even when the truth doesn't.
𝐂𝐨𝐬𝐿, a longtime acquaintance of the Loving family, expressed deep frustration over what she described as years of unheeded warnings. She shared that there had been multiple alerts to Child Protective Services, some submitted by her directly, regarding the children's safety. "Those of us who were familiar with the family kept speaking up," she said. "We reported again and again, hoping someone would step in. But at the end of the day, we weren't in a position to remove the kids ourselves, no matter how badly we wished we could." 𝐂𝐨𝐬 believes that a protocol should exist. If repeated reports are made, action should be taken sooner. There are too many stories where children are lost because intervention came too late. She also emphasized a widespread hesitation people feel when considering whether to report. Many, she said, worry their concerns will fall on deaf ears or be dismissed. Still, 𝐂𝐨𝐬 encourages others not to stay silent. Even if it feels like no one's listening, say something. Say it again if you have to, because one report might not change everything, but enough of them just might. And maybe cases like this will finally push for change. In the wake of the tragedy, 𝐂𝐨𝐬 and others are now supporting an initiative called Isabella's Law. The proposal would require more frequent and unannounced welfare checks for families previously flagged by child services. It's a suggestion born from heartbreak, but rooted in the hope of preventing future loss. Records reveal that Nicholas Loving had been convicted in a case back in 2014, this involving Andrea's eldest son from a prior relationship. At the time, Nicholas and Andrea had only been together a few months. The conviction stemmed from the toddler sustained, which Nicholas attributed to a mishap during bath time. Despite the charges, Andrea urged the court for leniency. The court granted probation, citing his employment, and expressed remorse. In an ironic twist only bureaucracy could deliver, the couple later shared joint custody of the same child. 𝐂𝐨𝐬 also recalled several conversations where Andrea seemed overwhelmed and frustrated with her children. She noted that Andrea often called Nicholas home from work to help. Regarding public claims that Andrea had been a victim of domestic abuse, 𝐂𝐨𝐬 shared her doubts. "She never acted afraid of him," she said. "In fact, she often praised him as a caring husband and father." Meanwhile, others in the community noticed unusual behavior, like Isabella being kept apart from other children during events. She was rarely seen interacting or eating, and any attempt to engage with her was quietly discouraged. At one point, a parent offering the child a blanket was reportedly turned down because nothing says "everything's fine here," like refusing kindness during cold weather. A school librarian recalls that during every interaction with the Loving family, Isabella remained in her stroller without much movement or engagement. While she found the family's behavior slightly unusual, she assumed the young girl may have been dealing with a medical condition. Still, after once noticing a mark on Isabella's face, the librarian felt uneasy enough to report it to Child Services. One of the more revealing aspects of Isabella's treatment at home came not from conversations, but from posts shared publicly by her mother, Andrea. Around the holidays, Andrea posted notes tied to an elf on the shelf, and many who later viewed them noticed they gave off a strange and uncomfortable feeling. In these posts, Isabella was either singled out or not mentioned at all. One particular note suggested that everyone in the house, including the parents, needed to improve their behavior in order to stay in Santa's good graces. The message warned that a final chance had been granted, making the holidays feel more like a probation period than a festive season. Oddly enough, even Isabella's name was spelled incorrectly, adding an unsettling sense of detachment. Another message used the elf to deliver what seemed like a veiled comment on family tensions, referencing arguments between the adults. In yet another, the elf reflected on sadness in the home, unsure how Santa might respond to what it had witnessed. What should have been a lighthearted game for children came across more like passive-aggressive commentary. And in the middle of it all, the elf became less of a toy and more of a silent witness with a very uncomfortable front row seat. After Isabella's passing, a quiet memorial took shape outside the house where she once lived. The sidewalk filled with soft tributes, balloons, flowers, candles, and small stuffed toys placed gently by those who wanted to honor her memory.
Around Cold Springs, pink ribbons have been tied on fences, street signs, and car mirrors. These ribbons not only reflect a community in mourning, but also represent a growing call for accountability. On April 11th, 2025, a candlelight vigil was organized in her name. As part of the tribute, residents were asked to light up their porches in her honor that evening. They were also encouraged to swap out their bulbs for pink or purple ones, colors said to be her favorites. The turnout that Friday was significant, with locals gathering to pay their respects and reflect on the loss of a young child. "It's completely surreal. Words really fail here," one person shared at the vigil. Thinking about what that child might have endured, it's hard not to feel overwhelmed. People did reach out, they filed reports, and yet somehow nothing changed. As a therapist, I've seen this happen before. Cases closed when they shouldn't be, and it stays with you. Thank you for taking the time to hear Isabella's story. It's one that stays with you, not only because of the photos or the pain in her eyes, but because the people who should have protected her didn't. And yet only one arrest has been made so far. With everything that's come to light, it's hard to imagine that accountability ends there. Hopefully justice still has a few steps left to take, even if it's just catching up slowly, one charge at a time. If Isabella's story moved you, please consider sharing this video to help raise awareness about the cracks in the systems meant to protect vulnerable children. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and if you believe change is overdue, say her name. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter, and hit the notification bell to stay updated as justice unfolds. No child should be forgotten, and no voice should go unheard. Imagine relying on others for every movement, every breath, only to discover the people you depend on aren't keeping you safe. In the US, 70% of wheelchair users experience preventable safety lapses, yet their calls for assistance frequently go unheard. Sometimes the silence becomes too loud to ignore. These numbers represent more than data. They represent lives like Heather's, a child who never spoke a word, yet whose silent strength resonates. Her impact echoes far beyond statistics, proving even the quietest lives can inspire our most urgent reforms. Heather's story began in the quiet charm of Gaffney, South Carolina, a place where golden autumn light filtered through the pine trees and the air carried the earthy sweetness of changing seasons. From her earliest days, there was a gentle stillness about her, as if she carried the calm of Carolina mornings in her very being. Even as an infant, Heather carried herself with remarkable serenity. Her thoughtful gaze appeared to hold a deep understanding beyond her years, observing the world with patient curiosity. Small hands moved with deliberate grace, but even the brightest lights sometimes face shadows. And for Heather, life, so full of softness and love, also came with challenges that no child should ever have to face. Research indicates that individuals with disabilities in the US face disproportionate challenges, with studies showing 70% experience difficult situations and 60% report facing barriers to proper care. Heather was a nonverbal child whose well-being was completely reliant on others. Her brother, who received state compensation as her caregiver, failed to meet her essential needs, creating life-threatening circumstances. Meanwhile, her parents, who should have been her strongest protectors, limited her contact with extended family and appeared to perceive her as primarily an obligation. When she was born, the doctors told her parents, David Eugene and Bobby Joe Baynard, that their baby girl likely wasn't going to survive. Heather had come into the world far earlier than expected, born prematurely at just 28 weeks. Even in those first fragile moments, it was clear her journey would not be an easy one. The doctors sat with her parents gently, their words careful but heavy. They explained that Heather had suffered a stroke while still in the womb, a silent, life-changing event that had unfolded before her first breath. Because of that stroke and the early birth, Heather's tiny body faced enormous challenges. The diagnosis was overwhelming: cerebral palsy, chronic lung disease, and epilepsy. She would experience regular seizures, and as she grew, her ability to move, communicate, and even breathe comfortably would be impacted. Doctors told David and Bobby Joe that their daughter might never see or hear. Her brain development, they explained tenderly, would be closer to that of a 3-month-old child, even as the years passed. Her complex medical needs required constant monitoring, yet for months she received no clinical follow-up. The wheelchair she relied on, left without maintenance, became a source of immobilization. But even in the midst of life's hardest battles, there are moments when pure joy breaks through. Moments when love, hope, and a little bit of magic offer a breath of light. For Heather, that moment came in the form of a wish to forget the hospital rooms, the doctor's visits, and the endless challenges, if only for a little while. Thanks to the incredible kindness of the Make-A-Wish Foundation and the Grin Kids program, Heather was given a gift every child dreams of: the chance to experience the wonder of Disney. But those magical moments were fleeting. Back home, Heather's care was quietly unraveling, and the brother paid by the state to protect her was cutting corners in ways no one yet realized. While Make-A-Wish had given her one perfect escape, the very people entrusted with her daily survival were failing her. As Heather grew older and her care requirements became increasingly complex, her family chose to transition her care to their home. Her older brother, Edward Vincent Baynard, assumed responsibility as her primary caregiver through a state-supported program. Employed as a certified personal care aide and respite nurse under Access Home Care, Edward received over $25,000 in state compensation, funds specifically allocated to ensure Heather received consistent, attentive daily support. This position carried significant obligations. Edward was entrusted not only with Heather's basic personal care and medical management, but also with ensuring she maintained regular contact with healthcare providers crucial to managing her condition. However, official records would later reveal concerning gaps in this care. During the final 16 months before Heather's passing, documentation shows no medical visits were completed. Even when remote healthcare options became available during and after the pandemic, there was no evidence of Heather receiving professional medical attention. An absence that investigators characterized as a complete failure to meet required care standards. The lack of proper care in Heather's final months led to that April night at the hospital, where the severity of her condition became undeniably clear. What medical staff and authorities later discovered was not just a sudden emergency, but the heartbreaking result of prolonged breakdowns in her care. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you to my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me. Your engagement helps make these stories even more meaningful. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts.
Heather's tragic situation resulted from failures across multiple levels of South Carolina's support systems. As a child with significant medical needs, including quadriplegic cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and chronic lung disease, Heather should have received consistent professional monitoring. Documentation reveals numerous warning signs that went unaddressed. The agency responsible for supervising Edward's caregiver services, Access Home Care, overlooked fundamental oversight responsibilities. State guidelines mandated in-person evaluations every 3 months to verify proper care standards. Yet records indicate a 17-month gap in home visits prior to Heather's passing. During later inquiries, the agency cited pandemic-related restrictions as justification, a claim contradicted by evidence showing other clients received remote check-ins during the same period. Edward's employment records presented additional concerns, showing he allegedly worked 40-hour caregiving shifts while simultaneously maintaining overnight employment at a convenience store, all while neighbors reported hearing dogs howling for food at all hours in the background. Heather's former primary care physician, Dr. Evan Lowry, discontinued her care in 2020 following 3 consecutive missed appointments. Despite Medicaid regulations requiring notification of authorities in such cases, the practice merely updated her file as non-compliant without further action. This decision had severe consequences. The lapse in Heather's seizure medication prescriptions left her without crucial treatment for extended periods. The South Carolina Department of Disabilities and Special Needs, DDSN, demonstrated particularly concerning oversights. As Heather's designated case management organization, they were obligated to perform monthly welfare verifications. Their documentation reflects only 2 brief telephone contacts during 2021, including one 4-minute call where Edward's assurances of "everything's fine" were barely audible over persistent animal noises. No in-person verification followed these calls. Remote healthcare options could have provided critical support during the pandemic, but the family declined all virtual visit opportunities. Medical records indicate specialists from MUSC Children's Hospital offered technology training and even provided a tablet device, which investigators later discovered unused in David's vehicle. The family maintained that Heather became distressed by screens. Though no prior documentation supported this claim, financial aspects of Heather's care created problematic incentives. Edward's caregiver compensation at $15 per hour substantially exceeded standard entry-level wages. Income he reportedly prioritized by limiting Heather's contact with medical professionals. Simultaneously, the family continued receiving her full disability benefits while failing to provide fundamental care, with David later acknowledging in court proceedings that they viewed the payments as compensation for the challenges we faced. The depth of systemic failure became particularly apparent when reviewing posthumous case notes. A DDSN administrator's file notation, "Client expired, case resolved," exemplified how bureaucratic processes ultimately failed to protect Heather's well-being. This institutional response, while not intentionally harmful, reflected a high concern detachment with irreversible consequences.
April 11th, 2022, Spartanburg, South Carolina. When 14-year-old Heather Baynard arrived at the hospital, she was already in extremely serious condition. Witnesses remembered her father carrying her in without any sense of urgency, his calmness unsettling given how sick she was. Heather's body was cold, her skin pale and gray, showing just how much her body had weakened. She was completely unresponsive, beyond the point of crying out or asking for help. The medical team worked quickly, trying everything to save her: oxygen, chest compressions, medications. But Heather's body had been through too much. At 9:32 p.m., she was declared deceased. While doctors fought to revive her, her parents sat quietly in the waiting room. Her father scrolled on his phone, showing no visible distress as the medical team worked desperately just feet away. When questioned about Heather's condition, Bobby Joe explained to medical staff that she had noticed her daughter's oxygen levels dropping dangerously low, reportedly as low as 30%. In response, she placed Heather in a bathtub, believing it might help. However, normal oxygen saturation levels should remain above 95%, and readings below 90% typically signal a need for immediate medical intervention. Heather's tracheostomy meant her breathing required regulated oxygen support, not physical stimulation. If her levels were truly that low, adjusting her oxygen supply would have been the appropriate action. Medical experts later confirmed, submerging a tracheostomy patient in water wasn't just useless. It could have accelerated her collapse by flooding her airways or triggering deadly spasms. The explanation raised serious concerns about whether Heather received the proper care she needed in those final moments, or if this was a desperate attempt to explain the unexplainable. What happened to Heather wasn't sudden. It was a slow, painful decline. When Cherokee County Coroner Dennis Fowler conducted the examination days later, he described it as the most severe case of inadequate supervision he'd encountered in his career. Heather's physical condition told a devastating story of prolonged hardship. Her legs had severe sores from being left in one position too long. Untreated infections had spread through her body. There were no signs of physical harm, just years of being ignored, until her body couldn't take anymore. Following Heather Baynard's passing on April 11, 2022, police began investigating her living situation. The next day, they searched her family's home on Camp Ferry Road and found extremely poor living conditions that concerned investigators. When officers entered the house, the conditions were so bad they had to wear protective suits and masks. The home was filled with large amounts of clutter and garbage, making it difficult to move around. There were obvious signs that basic cleaning and maintenance had been disregarded for a long time. Police found about 40 animals in varying states of distress. Emaciated dogs chained near empty bowls, cats with untreated wounds hiding in the debris. One officer noted the stench of rotting pet food mixed with human waste, writing in his report, "The animals were starving alongside her." Heather's sleeping area showed particularly troubling conditions, with clear violations of basic hygiene standards. Cherokee County Sheriff Steve Mueller later described the house as having dangerously unsanitary conditions, with animal waste throughout the home. The investigation showed these unhealthy conditions had existed for months or possibly longer. The dirty, cluttered environment likely created health risks for everyone living there, including Heather. Officials carefully photographed and documented the house's condition as part of their investigation. The evidence suggested the poor living situation may have affected Heather's health in her final months. When investigators talked to people living nearby, they discovered many had noticed signs of trouble at Heather's home, but didn't report anything. Some saw unusual amounts of trash piling up, while others heard disturbing noises, but didn't want to interfere in what they thought was a private family matter. This lack of reporting meant help arrived too late. After this case came to light, Child Protection Services took action to check on other families in the neighborhood. They found several households needing assistance and connected them with support services. Heather's experience became an important example that changed how the community responds to possible neglect cases. Local authorities use this situation to remind everyone that reporting concerns about a child's welfare isn't being nosy. It's an important way to protect vulnerable young people. They emphasize that when multiple people notice something wrong, but no one speaks up, children can remain in dangerous situations. New programs were created to make it easier for neighbors to report concerns confidentially. In May 2022, David, Bobby Joe, and Edward Bayard were taken into custody and faced multiple charges, including homicide, child endangerment, and animal neglect. The subsequent legal proceedings extended over several years, during which courtroom testimony and investigative evidence revealed troubling details about Heather's living situation. What began as standard legal proceedings would develop into one of South Carolina's most consequential cases, a 22-month judicial process that would reveal concerning care standards behind closed doors, until finally, through thorough courtroom examination, the full truth about Heather's situation would finally come to light. The Spartanburg County Courthouse was where Heather's case finally went to trial in 2024. For 11 long days, the court heard how what looked like simple neglect was actually something much worse hiding behind a normal family facade. Prosecutor Sarah Keyes laid out her case piece by piece. She showed Heather's dirty wheelchair next to receipts for Edward's new computer, bought with caregiver money, then played security footage from a neighbor's camera, time-stamped to match Edward's logged caregiver hours. The video showed him leaving the house repeatedly while dogs barked incessantly inside. While he collected paychecks for caregiving, Keyes told the jury, the records show he wasn't there. And those barks you hear, that's the sound of two victims, his sister and those animals, being ignored. The most shocking proof was pharmacy records showing Heather's seizure medicine hadn't been refilled for 9 months. Edward just said, she seemed fine without them. The defense's excuses fell apart. When David and Bobby Joe said Heather was too hard to care for, the prosecutor showed a video of them handling her medical needs perfectly during their Disney trip. Their lawyers claimed that pandemic stress caused the problems didn't hold up when evidence showed the parents took 3 vacations while Heather suffered. The witnesses made the courtroom emotional. Nurse Brianna Holt described discovering Heather's severe, untreated bed sores during her post-mortem examination. A child expert read texts where Bobby Joe called Heather "it" and complained about diaper changes. The hardest moment came when Heather's aunt admitted under oath that the family had talked about letting her go to make things easier. Edward's testimony hurt his case badly. He smiled inappropriately and claimed Heather liked being alone, saying her cries on a neighbor's security camera were just her singing. When shown photos of how thin Heather had become, he just said, she was always small. Jurors later said this moment convinced them of his guilt. In her closing argument, Prosecutor Keyes held up Heather's last baby tooth, found stuck in her throat during the autopsy, probably from years of no dental care. "This," she said quietly, "is what happens when people stop trying to care for a child." The defense's weak argument that the Baynards were just overwhelmed parents couldn't stand against the mountain of evidence. When the guilty verdicts came in, life sentences for David and Bobby Joe, lesser charges for Edward after his deal, Heather finally got justice. The judge's words said it all. "You didn't just fail Heather. You treated her like she wasn't human until the very end, leaving her no relief but an escape she never should have faced." There were no cheers when the sentences were read, just quiet sadness for a girl the system should have protected. On October 31st, 2024, the court reached its decision. David and Bobby Joe Baird received life sentences for their roles in the events leading to Heather's passing, along with additional penalties for child neglect and related offenses. Edward Baird was sentenced to 30 years in prison.
Heather Baynard's story could have been reduced to a footnote in a case file, another tragic statistic in a system that failed to protect its most vulnerable. But Heather was never just a number. She was a child who found magic in the floating lanterns of Tangled, whose hands fluttered like fairy wings when she was happy, whose small crescent moon birthmark made her uniquely her. These are the details that bureaucracy erases, but they're the ones that matter most, because they remind us that behind every headline is a human being who laughed, loved, and deserved so much more. Her passing in 2022 didn't just leave a void, it forced a reckoning. South Carolina's Heather's Law now mandates in-person welfare checks for medically vulnerable kids under state care, closing the gaps that left her invisible. The 40 malnourished animals found whimpering in her home, some so weak they couldn't stand, became Heather's silent witnesses. Their preventable conditions inspired cross-reporting laws, demonstrating neglect affects both human and animal welfare. And courts can now override parents who isolate at-risk children, because Heather's extended family might have saved her if only they'd been allowed to see her. Yet the uncomfortable questions linger like shadows. The autopsy showed Heather had clenched her hands so tightly during untreated seizures that her nails left half-moon marks in her palms. Did anyone hold those hands in her final days? Neighbors admitted they'd ignored the ammonia stench seeping from the house for months, dismissing it as just a messy home. How many red flags do we all walk past every day? Systems can be reformed, but the hardest change is in ourselves, to stop assuming someone else will act. So let's talk about what awareness really means. It's not just about grand gestures, it's about the quiet moments of attention. That wheelchair on the porch that hasn't moved in weeks, the dog that won't stop whining next door, the faded "for rent" sign in front of a house where you haven't seen the kids in months. These are the whispers before the tragedy, the chances to intervene before it's too late. Heather's story screams a simple truth. Survival shouldn't depend on being noticed by the right stranger at the right time. As the screen fades, one line lingers in white text. For the Heathers still waiting, may we learn to see what isn't shown. It's not an ending, it's a challenge. Because stories like this don't conclude with a verdict or a law. They live on in the choices we make tomorrow. Will we be the neighbor who knocks, the stranger who calls, or just another bystander telling ourselves it's none of our business? The credits roll, the video ends, but the question remains: what will you do with what you've just learned?
Kelsey, say, "Oh man." Oh man.
There are days no parent should ever face, days where profound challenges emerge. For a father in Oklahoma, this was the day he learned the truth about his daughter's final hours, not from memories, but from a medical examiner's official medical documentation. Medical examiners determined the cause of death to be injuries determined to be caused by human force, with injury patterns suggesting multiple traumatic events over time. The records documented several healed fractures, including a fully mended collarbone and partially healed leg fractures, indicating a prolonged period where medical intervention and protection were not adequately implemented. As her father reviewed the documents, he saw more than medical findings. He saw critical moments where intervention could have changed everything. The records revealed multiple points where systems designed to protect children had fallen short, leaving the most vulnerable without proper safeguards. But who was she, and how did it come to this? To understand that, we need to go back to the beginning. Lance Briggs and Ray Dawn Smith were just teenagers when they met in Meeker, Oklahoma. Lance had an easy charm, the kind that made people smile without effort. Ray was unforgettable, warm, full of dreams, and deeply rooted in her close family. They dated through high school but drifted apart after graduation, as young couples often do. Life took them in separate directions until years later, when they reconnected. Older now, and perhaps wiser, or so they believed. In 2001, their relationship reignited. The connection was still strong, and soon they married in a simple backyard ceremony at Ray's parents' home, surrounded by loved ones. It was a hopeful beginning, the kind that makes people believe in second chances. But behind the scenes, concerning patterns began emerging. The early days of their marriage held promise, but warning signs appeared quickly. Lance exhibited emotional volatility, unpredictable, intense, and worsened by substance use. His substance dependency challenges cast a shadow over their relationship. Arguments became more frequent, then more volatile. The charm Ray once admired gave way to concerning patterns of behavior, including emotional dysregulation. Tensions escalated beyond words. Ray did her best to manage the situation, but the conflict resulted in physical consequences. In July 2000, while Ray was pregnant, and physical confrontation resulted in pregnancy loss, marking a devastating turning point. Like many in challenging relationship dynamics, Ray wrestled with hope and fear. Hope that Lance might change, fear of what might happen if she left. For a year and a half, she held on, hoping for positive change while managing difficult circumstances. But by May 2002, the cycle had become unbearable. Ray filed for divorce. Lance, however, refused to walk away. Even after their split, he remained a persistent presence in her life. He ignored boundaries, showing up unannounced, entering her home without permission, leaving reminders that he was watching. A restraining order was issued, but it did little to deter him. His actions grew more erratic, his anger more volatile. Late-night visits, pounding on windows, an open back door left as a silent warning. Each incident chipped away at any sense of safety. Police reports piled up. Arrests followed for harassment, for public intoxication. But each time he was released, the cycle repeated. Promises gave way to threats. Regret twisted into rage. Yet in all this uncertainty, a single hope. In a quiet corner of Oklahoma City on a chilly winter night, December 28, 2002, a little girl came into the world who would touch the lives of everyone who knew her. Her name was Kelsey Smith. From her earliest days, Kelsey was a bright and lively child with an expressive face that reflected her curious nature. Those close to her remember Kelsey as exceptionally bright and social for her age. She had a quick mind and endless curiosity, constantly asking questions about the world around her. Whether dancing around the house in her favorite pink slippers or entertaining family with impromptu performances, she approached life with enthusiasm. Kelsey had particular favorites that brought her joy. She loved watching animated films like Brother Bear, Shrek, and Monsters, Inc., often reenacting scenes with childhood imagination. Outdoor activities delighted her, especially swinging where she would laugh with each push higher. Animals fascinated her, and she often interacted with pets as if they were playmates. Each night, Kelsey found comfort in a familiar routine, holding her well-loved Cabbage Patch doll as she fell asleep. This simple ritual represented the security and warmth of her childhood. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you to my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me. Your engagement helps make these stories even more meaningful. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts.
Just days after Kelsey's birth in December 2002, questions emerged about paternity. Lance Briggs requested a DNA test, but records indicate this decision wasn't entirely his own. His mother, Kathy Briggs, played a significant role in pushing for the test, a request that carried implications beyond simple biological confirmation. Kathy had long been a dominant influence in Lance's life. Her own background was complex. She became a mother as a teenager and married Kevin Robinson, though their relationship ended in divorce. The circumstances surrounding Kevin's death in 1979 were officially classified as suicide, though questions remained. Court documents show Kathy subsequently sought state custody of her children through unorthodox means. When Kelsey was born, Kathy's patterns of behavior resurfaced. The push for paternity verification appeared less about Lance's uncertainty and more about Kathy's long-standing tendencies to challenge relationships. Her personal history of instability seemed to shape these actions, with her influence extending beyond typical family dynamics into areas of control and doubt. As Kelsey grew, tensions developed between the two primary women in her life, her mother, Ray, and paternal grandmother, Kathy Briggs. What might have been normal family dynamics became strained by differing perspectives on caregiving. Kathy expressed concerns about Kelsey's welfare, while Ray viewed Kathy's involvement as excessive interference. Their interactions became increasingly complicated by mutual distrust and competing visions for Kelsey's upbringing. From early on, Kathy held reservations about Ray's parenting. She paid close attention to how Kelsey was cared for, frequently questioning Ray's choices. Drawing from her own life experiences, Kathy believed she recognized potential risks that Ray might overlook. This led her to take an unusually active role in monitoring Kelsey's well-being. Kathy maintained detailed records of her observations during visits with Kelsey, noting the child's emotional state and living conditions. She regularly shared these concerns with her son Lance, encouraging him to intervene regarding matters ranging from Kelsey's nutrition to general care. While Kathy saw this as responsible grandparenting, Ray experienced it as intrusive scrutiny. The situation created growing friction. Kathy perceived herself as fulfilling a protective role, acting on what she considered warning signs in Kelsey's care. Ray, however, felt her parenting was being unfairly judged and undermined. Each interaction between the women became increasingly tense, with Kathy's vigilance being met by Ray's resistance. At its core, the conflict represented contrasting approaches to family roles. Kathy operated from a place of deep concern, believing her involvement could prevent potential harm. Ray interpreted these actions as challenges to her parental authority. This fundamental disconnect meant their relationship remained strained, despite sharing concern for Kelsey. Caught between them was young Kelsey, whose well-being both women genuinely wanted to protect. Yet their differing methods created an environment of constant tension that ultimately affected the child they both loved.
During this turbulent period in Kelsey's young life, as her parents remained in conflict and her grandmother maintained close involvement, a new figure entered the picture. Michael Porter presented himself as a stable presence, a business professional who became involved in Kelsey's care. Documentation shows he participated in various aspects of her life, from medical appointments to communications with child welfare services. However, subsequent investigations would reveal concerning contradictions between this outward appearance and other aspects of his behavior. Michael Porter first met Ray Dawn Smith in their shared hometown of Meeker, Oklahoma, a close-knit community where relationships and reputations were well known. For Ray, who was navigating the challenges of divorce and custody arrangements, Michael's stable presence appeared to offer much-needed support. A lifelong Meeker resident, Michael maintained a low-profile background. Community members described him as composed and self-assured. He had a daughter, Whitney, from a previous relationship, common ground that Ray found reassuring as they bonded over shared parenting experiences. Their relationship progressed quickly. Within months, they were regularly spending time together as a blended family. Observers noted Michael's visible involvement in Ray's life, accompanying her to various appointments and legal proceedings. When they married on April 18, 2005, it appeared to mark a positive new chapter for Ray and her daughter. Michael actively participated in family matters, attending court hearings, meeting with child welfare representatives, and joining Kelsey's medical visits. His outward behavior suggested commitment to his new family role. However, as events would later demonstrate, this surface impression didn't tell the complete story, and initial signs that might have raised questions were subtle enough to overlook. Only with time would a more complex picture emerge about the nature of Michael's involvement in their lives. In the months following Michael Porter's arrival in their lives, Kelsey began showing unexplained injuries. The first incident occurred in January 2005, when Ray Dawn brought her daughter to the emergency room with a broken collarbone and multiple bruises. Medical records show Ray explained this as a fall from her toddler bed, and with no immediate red flags, doctors released Kelsey to her care. But just days later, during a visit with her father Lance and stepmother Ashley, more bruises were noticed. This second hospital visit prompted Lance and his mother Kathy to voice their concerns to authorities. Medical staff documented the injuries thoroughly, with one nurse noting the bruising patterns seemed unusual. While investigators ultimately accepted Ray's explanation that some marks came from falls, the episode marked the beginning of an ongoing pattern. Despite these troubling signs, Ray's relationship with Michael progressed quickly. They married that April in a courthouse ceremony. Around this time, Kelsey suffered another injury, a sprained ankle during a zoo trip that Ray promptly reported to Child Services herself. The wedding weekend brought fresh complications. While staying with Kathy, Kelsey developed difficulty walking, yet records indicate no medical attention was sought despite multiple gymnastics sessions. When Ray collected her daughter, doctors discovered spiral fractures in both legs. The medical team who initially treated Kelsey concluded these were accidental injuries, though a second opinion obtained by Kathy suggested otherwise. What followed was a heartbreaking back and forth. The courts temporarily placed Kelsey with Kathy, then gradually allowed Ray supervised then unsupervised visits, with the strict condition that Michael not be present. Throughout this period, Kelsey continued returning from visits with new bruises that Ray consistently attributed to childhood mishaps. Those close to the situation noticed something disturbing. The frequency of these incidents seemed to increase after Michael entered the picture. Yet without conclusive evidence, the troubling pattern continued, leaving Kelsey caught in the middle of conflicting adult perspectives and growing concerns.
Following months of legal proceedings and child welfare investigations, the custody case regarding Kelsey reached its conclusion in court. The previous months had seen multiple medical evaluations, supervised visitations, and thorough reviews of Kelsey's care situation. After being temporarily placed with her grandmother, Kathy Briggs, in January 2005, the court now evaluated whether Kelsey could safely return to her mother's care. Records indicate Ray Dawn Smith fully cooperated with all court requirements during this period. She participated in supervised visitation sessions where observers documented appropriate interactions between mother and daughter. Court-ordered parenting classes were completed, and Ray Dawn maintained consistent communication with child welfare authorities about Kelsey's well-being. By March 2005, the court approved progression to unsupervised visits, though with specific conditions in place. These included the requirement that Michael Porter not be present during these visitations, based on ongoing case evaluations. Child Protective Services conducted multiple assessments during this period. Their findings included no conclusive evidence establishing intentional harm by Ray Dawn, medical professional opinions suggesting accidental causes for Kelsey's injuries, full compliance by Ray Dawn with all court directives, positive observations during all supervised interactions. After thorough review of all case materials, CPS submitted their formal recommendation in June 2005 that Kelsey should be returned to her mother's full custody. This recommendation noted Ray Dawn's cooperation with all requirements and lack of substantiated evidence supporting continued separation. Judge Craig Key, after examining all submitted documentation and considering the CPS assessment, issued the final ruling returning full legal custody of Kelsey to Ray Dawn Smith. Court records show this decision aligned with standard judicial practices of deferring to child welfare experts in such cases.
In June 2005, following extended legal proceedings, Ray Dawn Smith was reunited with her daughter. The family established their household with Smith's new partner, Michael Porter. This hopeful chapter would unexpectedly end just months later. On October 11, 2005, emergency services responded to a residence in Meeker, Oklahoma, where a young child required immediate medical attention. The child, who had recently been involved with Child Protective Services, was under the supervision of her mother and stepfather, Michael, at the time. First responders transported the child to a medical facility, but unfortunately, medical intervention was not effective. Medical professionals involved in this 2005 Oklahoma case documented critical findings that raised important questions about child protection systems. Their observations revealed a 45-minute window between when the child first showed a health emergency and hospital arrival, a time frame that became significant for investigators. During the investigation, authorities learned from a school counselor that Porter's child had shared worrisome details about their home environment. The child told the school counselor that their parent asked them not to talk about what happened at home. He shared that his father acted nice when others were around, but different when they were alone together. Documentation showed the younger child exhibited signs of unease during normal daily interactions with Porter. As part of their digital investigation, officials discovered inappropriate content on Porter's personal devices. This evidence contributed to legal proceedings being initiated against him in October 2005, with serious charges being filed in accordance with the findings. While Ray Dawn Smith was not home when the incident occurred, she later faced legal accountability related to child welfare concerns. At the same time, Kelsey's grandmother, Kathy Briggs, became involved in the case, speaking with officials and Michael Porter. Documents show she supported using Porter's statements in the legal proceedings against Ray Smith. Officials claimed there were earlier indications of risk before Child Services got involved, but records show Kelsey's grandmother said she hadn't seen any injuries on the child before 2005. Later, Michael Porter made a deal with the court. He agreed to a 30-year sentence in exchange for sharing information about Ray's role. Even though past records showed Porter had spoken well of Smith's parenting and allowed her to care for his own kids, this wasn't discussed much in court. During the legal proceedings, Smith's defense team stated her connection to Porter was a poor decision. They also explained that family conflicts impacted the situation. The court ultimately held Smith accountable for not properly protecting a child and issued a 27-year prison term. Later attempts to reopen the case or modify the sentencing terms were denied.
When we examine Kelsey Smith Briggs' tragic story in its entirety, uncomfortable questions emerge about how multiple warning signs went unaddressed. The documented evidence paints a troubling pattern that raises legitimate concerns about systemic failures in child protection. Records show Michael Porter's behavior followed a concerning behavioral pattern. School counselors documented concerning statements from his own daughter about Kelsey's treatment during private moments. Daycare providers submitted multiple reports about Kelsey's distressed behaviors, stress-related behaviors including hair thinning and nervous habits that professionals recognize as potential injuries determined to be caused by human force. These were concrete observations, not vague suspicions. Yet these critical reports became overshadowed by other factors. Case files reveal how Kathy Briggs' persistent communications with Child Services created competing narratives. While vigilance from family members is important, the volume of these interactions appears to have complicated rather than clarified the situation. The child welfare system itself faced structural challenges. Overburdened caseworkers juggling heavy caseloads often struggle to distinguish urgent signals from background noise. In Kelsey's case, procedural requirements and conflicting accounts seemingly diverted attention from the child's visible distress signals. This case highlights the difficult balance child protection systems must strike between due process and urgent action. When bureaucratic processes become the focus rather than the child's observable condition, the system risks failing its fundamental purpose. Kelsey's story underscores why child welfare reforms continue to emphasize better coordination between schools, medical providers, and social workers, trauma-informed training to recognize nonverbal distress signals, systems to filter legitimate concerns from interpersonal conflicts, resources to manage caseloads effectively, While no system can prevent all harm, examining these institutional shortcomings remains essential to protecting other vulnerable children. The true measure of Kelsey's legacy will be whether it leads to meaningful improvements in how we safeguard at-risk youth. I believe there are reasonable questions about Ray Dawn Smith's awareness of the situation. Records show she consistently sought medical care for Kelsey and reported injuries to authorities, actions that typically demonstrate parental concern. The fact that Michael Porter continued to allow her contact with his own children after these events adds further complexity to the case. This situation highlights important considerations about child protection systems. First, the challenges in recognizing warning signs. Second, the difficult questions raised when examining all aspects of the legal outcome. The circumstances invite careful reflection on how such cases are evaluated. This case weighs on me because the system may have experienced multiple breakdowns, first by missing Kelsey's suffering, then by potentially over-punishing Ray. If she were truly guilty, why seek medical help? Why would a person found responsible trust her with his kids? The contradictions make me wonder if Ray was unfairly targeted. What do you think? Was this a fair outcome? For more thoughtful, true crime analysis that goes beyond simple answers, subscribe for our weekly deep dives into these complex cases.